Okay, let me pause this. Assalamu alaikum, everyone. First of all, I would like to thank you all for coming to our second webinar um, today, hosted by Mr. Muhammad Abdisalam. Um, Today's topic will be on how I built it, where we have with us three amazing guests and an amazing sponsor of the event, Mukhtar Mahmoud from Nuni, who will shortly speak as well. So sit back, enjoy. Make sure you guys have your cups of shah ready, and let's get cracking. Over to you, Mr. Muhammad Abdisalam.
Thank you very much, Abshir. Salam alaikum, everyone. Thank you for joining us. So yes, as Abshir said, today we're going to be hearing how our panelists have built the different app services that they've built. So we'll be hearing from Hiba Abdullah, who's a junior software engineer, who's put together Rhombus Run, which is a great game. I recommend it. We'll also be hearing from Abdurrahman Jama, co-founder of Jama, as well as Mohammed Sheikh, who's co-founder of Codivate and a software engineer. So just before we get into that, I'm going to share my screen. For those who don't know about Somalis in tech, we have a few slides just to give you a flavor of what we're about. So here we are. So really what we are is a community for all things Somali and tech. Our mission really is to empower and to support the upskilling of those in the community into tech roles such as software engineering, UX, UI, design, product management, and anything in between. If you haven't seen it already, our previous event was focusing on non-coding roles in tech, so you can check that out on YouTube. If you search Somalis in Tech, subscribe as well. We're obviously aiming to connect the community. So hopefully we want a global community of talented Somali techies and give them the tools and space to collaborate. So through events such as this, hopefully there'll be many networking opportunities for those. Feel free to message each other and reach out to each other on social media as well, of course. And in the future, we'll hopefully host live events, in-person events, shall I say. And finally, to grow, so a community to give them the tools. So we covered that actually. And why are we doing this? The aim really is to tackle the lack of diversity in the global tech industry. Abshir, who spoke, had the idea of having been in the tech industry himself. I wanted to, connect with others who are like-minded. So hopefully we're aiming that this community will allow us to bring that together. And as we grow to address humanitarian and economic problems in Somali territory and the different communities through tech solutions. Okay, if I just move this over. So how do we aim to do so? So mentorship program. Today we have, for instance, three panelist speakers who are very well experienced and well-versed in their fields. So it could be that, hopefully we have a mentorship program where you could reach out to them for mentoring sessions, and others who are obviously interested and of the same caliber and like to give back to the community. Hackathons, where we hope to solve problems within the community. So we've got actually Mohammed who can touch on of his experience in hackathons, and more community-led events, so panel discussions, workshops, informal networking events. So things that have a wide reach and can hopefully allow us to reach as many people as possible. And finally, partnerships. So Abshir mentioned we have Mukhtar here from Newny, and we really aim to establish relationships with tech companies to leverage recruitment opportunities. Last time we had ID, but that's really our aim. And as we grow in our journey, we hope that everyone can benefit. In the eventual game, the eventual aim is to tap into a global network. We know we have, we want to support and foster collaboration with those around the globe, so the diaspora and back home as well. So do reach out, promote the event, Somalis in Tech. If you use that hashtag on Twitter, then that hopefully will allow others to hear about the event who may not be with us today, and it will be on YouTube as well. So yeah, get involved. Somalis in Tech. At Somalis in Tech is our Twitter. Reach out to us if you've got any questions. If you're not on Twitter, feel free to drop us an email if you'd like to get involved. If you have suggestions for what we can do to improve and build the community and so forth. And these are our speakers today, Hiba, Abdurrahman, and Mohammed Sheikh. But just before we get into that, we are in collaboration with Newny. So Mukhtar will tell us a bit more about Newny and why we've partnered. So the benefit is, if I just stop sharing screen, let me go and exit. And 1 second, bear with me. Okay. So okay, so stop sharing. Yeah, so a little bit of technical issues there, but good to be back. Yeah, so Newny is Mukhtar is the co-founder. It's a way to stay engaged with your community through tools such as the Q&A tool that we'll be using tonight. I will share a link. We'll be taking questions. So do please register. If I just go to all panelists and attendees, and we'll be taking, no, that's the wrong one. Let's come back. Unfortunately, I did get to share with you the type form though. We really want feedback, everyone. I'm going to share that form loads of times, and we do want feedback. So please, if you'd like to give us some feedback now, the community, so something that we hope to benefit everybody. So we can only do that if we know what your needs are and what it is you expect from the community. So yeah, do fill out the feedback form. I'm going to hand over to Mukhtar, who's going to let us tell us a little bit more about Nuni.
All right, assalamu alaikum everybody. My name is Mukhtar Mahmoud. Can you guys see me? Can you hear me? Yep, perfect. Yeah, so yeah, I'm the, as Mohammed said, I'm the co-founder of Nuni. It's an audience engagement platform. We mainly work with the organizations similar to Somalis in Tech, community organizations. We work with as well city councils and universities, where we try to bring a sort of interactivity from the audience and from residents and citizens in cities and community members to engage and take part and become more active in the communities that they're with. So that's why we try and focus on organizations that have a social element to them, or a social first element. And so, yeah, and today what we're going to be doing is we're going to be taking the questions via the link. Well, I'll share the link with everybody here right now. And so it takes about, it'll take you guys about 30 seconds on there, and just to quickly sign up and click here to join, and then you can paste in your questions. So the main reason why we want the questions on there is so that we could make it as part of the event itself. So we try and include the attendees not just in the chat boxes, but we want you guys as part of the actual event itself. So later on, I'll be sharing my screen with all the questions that you guys post on there. And also you can go on there, just look at the different types of questions that are on there and upvote it as well. And the platforms also are sort of a resource center as well. So in the future, inshallah, when Somalis in Tech has anything else that they want to share, they can post it on there. And because you're registered on there, if you opt in, you can then receive sort of newsletter style emails to let you guys know of any updates or anything like that pertaining to this particular organization. So yeah, that's all for now. So yeah, you
just to add to that, it takes less than 30 seconds to register. If you have a Google account, even quicker. So there's Google authentication. So follow that link that Mukhtar shared in the chat, and get your questions in now if you have any in advance. And as we go through, we'll be looking out for questions on Nuni as well. We want to support Somali business, so do sign up, register, and support the cause. Unfortunately, today we were also supposed to have Abdi Ibrahim with us from Tinaf, but he's fallen ill, so he couldn't make it. So instead, I'll be handing over, well, not instead, actually, we're supposed to have Hiba. We'll have Hiba who's speaking. She's a junior software engineer and has recently completed the Makers Academy bootcamp, and her previous roles were in market research for the likes of the BBC. So Hiba will talk us through how she built Rhombus Run and her journey today. Hiba, over to you.
Yeah, thanks, Mohammed. I'm just gonna share my screen. So give me a second, guys. Okay, can you see my screen?
Yes, we can, Hiba.
Okay, great. Yeah, so thanks for the introduction, Mohammed. I was going to introduce myself, so I'll do it again anyway. But my name's Hiba, and this year I decided to change careers to software development. I was previously a market researcher, and I have a degree in psychology, but that just got a bit boring and mundane for me. So I career changed, and I recently completed the Makers Academy Coding Bootcamp, and Rhombus Run was my final project. So anyone who's tuning in right now that's thinking of taking a bootcamp or thinking of career changing, just feel free to reach out to me on Twitter. And yeah, any questions you have, put it in the Newny link that's been shared. Okay, so you might be thinking, what is Rhombus Run? And how did we get the initial idea for Rhombus Run? Well, my team were the games team, and we were interested in making a game that would be themed around the current pandemic situation. Initially, we did consider making a game, this game a bit more educational, an educational kids game to educate them on the social distancing rules that were in place in a fun way. But ultimately, we decided to go for something everyone can use and everyone can benefit from and be entertained by. So the aim became to make a light-hearted game to entertain players during the current lockdown situation, with Boris Johnson as the protagonist. And what we came up with is a 2D platform game where you can help Boris Johnson to socially distance from passers-by and keep his infection rate under 1. Oh, and I forgot to mention, but the link to the game's on screen. So if you want, go on your browser, your computer, preferably Google Chrome, for best results and have a play of the game yourself. But if you can't, don't worry, because I have prepared a demo. And I'll just play that now. Obviously, that was quite a short demo. I do encourage you to go, click on the link, play, see how far you can get. And next, I thought I'd run through the features that we decided to include in the game. This shows the majority of the features. And a couple I'd like to highlight are firstly the web page. So we built the web page in React, and it comes with information about how to play the game and information about the makers of the game and the controls. And next, you've got levels with increasing difficulty and the infection rate measure. And that was put in place to make it harder for you to win the game and basically make it a more enjoyable and entertaining game. So the idea is that the further the distance you get in the game, the faster the passerbys become and the more passerbys that spawn. So you should hopefully fail and get a game over and be enticed to play again. The background movement is also an interesting one that I wanted to highlight. So that works by having the background image move across the screen from left to right when the player reaches the middle of the screen. So it creates like an illusion of movement, and Boris is never actually passing the middle of the game canvas, but because the background is moving, it appears as if Boris is walking and actually moving through the town. So next, I thought I'd take you through the tech stack and basically dive more into how we actually built the game and included all these great features. So we primarily used HTML5 and JavaScript to build the game. HTML5 has a cool canvas element that enables you to render 2D shapes and images dynamically onto a screen in combination with JavaScript. So these two technologies here were the most crucial to the development of the game. CSS was, of course, used for styling and making everything look really pretty on the website. And React in the top right in the blue corner is a JavaScript framework that we use to build the website that the game is loaded in, as well as the other web pages like the controls page and the about us page. And finally, the two icons at the bottom, that's Travis CI and Jest. So app makers were all about test-driven development, and it's something that they really, really emphasize. And test driving your code is really important to make sure that everything is working as it should be and that any changes that you make won't break the website that's in production. and it's basically really good for quality control. So they were also two really crucial tools for us. Okay, next, I thought I'll take you a bit through, talk you through the planning and development phase of building Rhombus Run. So we had 2 weeks to build the game. And so we had to be really thorough initially in our planning process to ensure that we could get this done in time, especially since none of us actually had experience making a game before. And first, the planning part was probably the most important stage, to ensure that everyone was on the same page before we broke off into teams and began coding. Overall, we spent about 2 to 3 days planning, which is a significant chunk of time when you have only 2 weeks. But again, it was a really important stage, and I always recommend planning any project thoroughly before you start. And it's something that I've actually taken on board from this project, to always thoroughly plan before I write even one line of code. So one thing we did during this planning stage was domain modeling. And this is when you plan out how your code is going to be structured before you even began coding. So what we did here is separate the different aspects of the game into different classes, which could carry out their own, which each carried out their own methods. So an example that I'll put out here is the game class. So that was in charge of monitoring the general running of the game. And so therefore the methods that we put in that class will relate to that overall purpose of that class. So the start function, which obviously would start the game, and the other methods like the draw and update function that are responsible for loading the different elements like the background and the characters onto the canvas, and also bringing those elements back onto screen when they eventually went off the screen, so the game looks like a loop. So this was a really important stage for us to really plan out exactly how many classes we'd have and what we'd need to do. And eventually when we broke off into little teams, and everyone would know where to start and what methods and games all the classes should be called. So next, an important stage was mock-ups. This was a really important part of the planning process to help visualize and plan out the acceptance criteria and like the requirements that we wanted in the game. So for example, we knew we wanted a social distancing feature in the game. So we used mock-ups to visualize how that would look. And that's the two that I'm showing on the screen. And from that, we could determine what actions would go with that feature. So by mocking up the social distancing feature, we knew that, okay, we need the user to be able to jump over the passerby so that they could actually avoid the passerby and socially distance from that passerby. And we'd also need some kind of distance threshold, which is represented by the orange arrow, or a kind of limit, you could think of it as, to kind of just detect the collisions and penalize the player if they didn't socially distance. So also I wanted to draw attention to the fact that the mock-up doesn't actually look the same at all as the final product. And I just wanted to stress that, to say that it's okay at the beginning to just make a really messy looking, really basic looking mock-up. It's just for you to get an idea of what you want, the requirements you want, how it could look in the end, but it doesn't have to be particularly amazing. It's just to get you to a point where you could have like a minimum viable product. So that's the planning phase. And next I'm going to go on to the development phase. And we followed a strict agile development process, which is another thing that Makers Academy really champion. And agile, if you don't know, is a way of team working that involves a set of practices that basically enables the team to succeed in whatever kind of collaborative development environment you're in. And three important parts of the agile process was stand-ups, retrospectives, and sprints. So stand-ups and retrospectives were meetings that we'd have at the beginning and end of the day to make sure that everyone is keeping in constant communication and everyone's on the same page with what they should be doing. But it was also really useful to flag when any issues had arisen and if anyone had any concerns that they wanted to raise. The sprints are like a time box period when a team works to complete a set amount of work. So this was once we'd had the planning done and we knew what we wanted to get started with, we'd allocate a task to pairs and then we'd give them maybe a day or 2 days, depending on how big the task was, to complete that task. So that's what a sprint is, and that's this is the way that we worked while we were developing Rhombus Run. And I want to also highlight a really useful tool for us, which was Trello. It's an online list-making application, and it enabled us to organize what we were working on and assign tasks to different members of the team. So as you can see, we had a to-do list on one side, the left-hand side, that showed what work was upcoming and needed to be done. And then on the right hand, we had like an in-progress list, which showed what we were currently working on and the people that were responsible for it. So along with our regular meetings, it enabled us to keep up to date with what was underway. And it was just a really good central reference point to just keep checking and updating so that everybody could be, you could avoid things like people taking on a task that was already done by someone else and everyone was just on the same page at all times. And next, I want to take you through how we structured our game. And we used a very well-known design framework called the Model View Controller Framework, which helps us to separate our game in a really clear and organized way. So I'll just quickly explain what the Model View Controller is, in case you don't know. And we'll start off first in the top right-hand corner with the view. And that's essentially the layer of the application that you as a user can see and interact with. And when there's some sort of user action, like a button click or a key press, this user action is sent to the controller layer. Then the controller layer is in charge of how the app functions. And you can think of it like a redirector that sends the user action to the right place in the model layer. So this would be the class and the method that needs to process the data in the model layer. So the model layer holds all that data and knows what needs to be carried out when a request is made. So it will process the request from the controller and then pass it back to the controller, and the controller will pass it back and update the view, and then you will see the change on screen. So it might be just a key press that causes Boris Johnson to move right, but that is what has happened behind the scenes to make Boris Johnson move to the right. So I'll just show you how that model view controller worked in our for our game. So firstly, the view. This doesn't need much explanation. This was just what you could see. The view handled adding objects to the stage and that the player can see, and the controller layer handled the collisions and the key presses and all your user actions. So example here is if the up key is pressed, the controller will handle the request to make Boris jump. If the controller detects that Boris has collided with a platform, the controller will handle the request to make sure that Boris doesn't just fall through the platform, but he actually lands on the platform. And those requests are sent to the model layer, as I said. So all the elements that are on screen are separated into their own models. And this was the kind of classes that I outlined earlier. And each model has its list of attributes that determine their behavior. So for example, Boris has a speed attribute to determine how fast he moves. And platforms have size and position attributes to determine how and where they're placed on the screen. And these attributes can get changed depending on the controller action. So for example, as I mentioned with the game, so as you go through and you get a further distance along, the pedestrian speed will go up. So that's controller action. That's detecting when the distance has reached a certain limit or point, and then it causes the pedestrian to speed to increase so that this pedestrian gets faster and looks like it's running towards you. So yeah, that's the end of my presentation. Thank you all for listening. Here's the link if you'd like to play for yourself, and I'd be happy to answer whatever, any and all questions that you have about the process and the game and career changing as well. So, thank you.
Amazing, Hiba. That was absolutely great. I'm sure everyone's thinking the same, and we have many questions for you actually. And yeah, so Mukhtar, are you able to share your screen? And we'll be taking the questions on Newny, as we said. Feel free to upvote the questions that you're interested in, and we'll start with Hiba. Here we are. So the first question: how do you approach high pressure situations when everything goes wrong?
Oh, okay. We had that at the beginning of this project actually. So we initially wanted to use a game framework in JavaScript called Phaser that would like handle all the like complex game logic, like collision detection and everything like that. And we wouldn't really have to do much of the JavaScript script coding on that. But we found that we couldn't really test that framework. And obviously, because Makers Academy, the criteria for making the game would be to have code coverage and tests in your application. We had to scrap it.
Yeah.
So that's literally
Okay.
2 days of work we had to scrap. And that was such a high pressure, intense situation. We were all really quite deflated. But I think it's important to just not be precious about code. Like, you can always scrap it, you can start again. Like, it's all about trying to enjoy the process and taking those high pressure situations and taking a learning from it. So the learning that I took was not to worry if I had to have to scrap code. So that's what I suggest.
Wow, well, that's really, really insightful. I'm thinking that's actually quite good to know for those others who are starting out on their journey, to know that, you know, even if you do scrap it, there is a way back. MashaAllah. So thank you for that, Hiba. Next question as well, 3 votes. These are some really good questions. What features would you like to add in the game in the future? And what would you do differently if you would have to rewrite the code from scratch? You kind of alluded to that. But and obviously, great job on the game. It's very impressive.
Oh, thank you. Actually, we had loads and loads of features that we wanted to add to the game. We were like so ambitious at the start. And I think a main one that I would have loved to have added is a scoreboard, just so that people can feel a bit more enticed to like beat a score, and also for all of you users to kind of interact and see everyone who's playing on the game, rather than just
absolutely.
feeling like you're just playing it by yourself.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Do you think, is that something we can wait on? Maybe is that something that you're thinking you might be able to do, or
I really could.
I'm sure, because
but no promises, but
no
maybe.
promises, because I'm seeing the chat and everyone's really loving the game, and obviously the presentation. So I'm sure here we go, someone's like version 2.0 coming soon, so there we are. But yeah, let us know, Hiba. And so yeah, just to also just take a little pause there, in the sense that we've got Hiba codes, that's where they can find you on Twitter as well. And also for those who are listening in, do give a shout out to Hiba, follow her, and hashtag Somalis in Tech as well, spread the word. And Hiba, we'll take one more question just before we go on to Abdul, but hopefully we'll have more time for questions. So for those who are here, do add to your question on Newny, and we'll come back inshallah towards the end. But last question, Hiba. Hello, Hiba. If you could master one language this year, what would it be and why?
Ooh, if that's in terms of a coding language, then at the moment JavaScript. Like, JavaScript is kind of, it's tough. It's tougher to master than I thought it would be. It's definitely one that it's a bit easy at the beginning, and then suddenly it's like tough. So I would love to master JavaScript. I think it just has so many applications, but I also am really interested in Python. So yeah, that's you.
So this, and what about if you had to give a shout out to a specific framework within JavaScript? Because I saw somebody mentioned React. I know you're working on a project with Vue. What are your, if there was a specific framework, what would you say?
Still React. Like, I have been playing around with Vue, and I just prefer Abshir. It's React over Vue any day. Vue is not that intuitive. I prefer React. I think it's cleaner. I think it's I would love to get more experience with Redux and just learn more. So definitely React for me right now.
Okay. All right, brilliant. So it's JavaScript as well as React. Amazing. Thank you very much. That was amazing. And people have also asked for the slides. So I will reach out to you separately about that. And there will be an opportunity to come back on the video to watch this again in YouTube. There's many insightful things. So yeah, for those who are listening, if you missed something, hopefully this will be going up on YouTube, so you can watch that back again and slow it down as well if there's a specific part you're interested in. So yeah, thank you very much, Hiba. Now we'll be hearing from Abdul Jama. Abdul's a self-taught software engineer. He will talk us through what building the social network that connects communities has been like. So that's Jama. Abdul, over to you.
Yeah. Can you guys hear me? Yeah.
Yes, we can, Abdul.
Yes. Okay, salam alaikum everyone. My name is Abdul. I've been over the past maybe 18 months, I've been working on Jama, which I think can you guys see my screen? It was supposed to share my screen. Yeah, just bear with me a moment, yeah?
No problem, bro. In the meantime,
Can you guys see
I mentioned it. Yeah, I mentioned earlier, Abdul, we can see your screen. But I just wanted to say again, we've got feedback forms. I'll be sharing that in the chat shortly. And please do give us your feedback, both about the event, but also what you want from the community, Somalis in Tech. We've got a few questions as well about where you'd like the community to be housed. Is it Slack, Facebook, and how you'd like to engage with us. So please do fill it in. We can only improve if we hear about your thoughts. It's a great opportunity to do so. So I will share the link again, inshallah. So yeah, over to you, Abdul.
Cool. All right. So so I wanted to kind of just I think basically when you've been working on a project for like 18 months, it changes a lot. And maybe about like a couple of months ago, I went on the internet sort of time machine thing where you can sort of look at a specific page at a specific moment in time. And I couldn't believe that was Jama maybe like a year ago or 14 months ago or whatever. And that's just because the project has changed so much. I'm gonna kind of talk through the basic structure of the talk is I'm gonna tell you guys a little bit about the problem that Jama is trying to fix. And then kind of go through the stack a little bit and then kind of go through like specific problems that we came across. I'm the technical co-founder, so that means that it was my responsibility to kind of like write the coding, the code, and to kind of like do like certain like producty stuff. Whereas my business partner does more kind of like businessy things. So let's go ahead and kind of talk about Jama. Yeah. So essentially, the basic principle behind Jama was like, you sometimes have questions that you don't necessarily have answers to. And this is something that, this isn't necessarily new. There were platforms like Last.fm, I think, no, not Last.fm, it was called Ask.fm, and Curious Cat, and all of these platforms. I think there was one called Saraha, which in the Middle East, which was really big. And all of these sort of fed into this sort of human need to sort of ask questions and to get sort of answers for them. And often like sometimes these questions were pretty trivial questions, granted. But also sometimes it was like life-changing opinions, right? Like people asking each other questions that that could potentially change lives. And so, but the thing that we found was that like, there was a couple of things. One is like platforms like Quora and Reddit exist, but they are slightly different. And we're going to talk about why that is. But essentially, we often found that the internet, even though it is a vast kind of like resource for information, it's often written by Adans, right? Men of a specific age. I read some stat about how like Wikipedia is essentially like mostly edited by, this is why like if you look at the amount of like English language Wikipedia pages and you compare them to like non-English language, you'll just see that there's this almost like huge disconnect between sort of like knowledge production and the kind of knowledge that's been written about. So this is what the problem seemed to us, right? It was like, sometimes I have questions, some people kind of, and the kind of questions that we're interested was like cultural, right? Like things that were like specific to a culture, but also things that were specific to like getting jobs and things that would just take into account who you are. So here is the issue, right? If you think of like certain communities, the example that I really like is like, if you look at the Gujarati community and you think, why does the Gujarati community produce so many doctors? It's not because like Gujaratis are innately good at being doctors. It's because maybe like some guy became a doctor and he just brought his boys in, right? It's sometimes as simple as that. If you look at like, apparently like the donut business in like California is like dominated by people from Cambodia. Apparently like parking business in Washington DC is dominated by Ethiopians, you know, like taxis by Pakistanis in like certain parts of the north of England. You know, we dominated the internet cafe business for a long time, and of course that came to an end, which is very sad. But it is a network thing, right? It is a network thing. It's like, who do you know that can give you access to that, right? Who do I know that's got an internet cafe? Can they hook me up with like their computer supplier? Can they hook me up with how to get the A1 license that I need from the local council, you know, whatever it is. But sometimes it's actually a semantics problem, right? Sometimes the question that you think is being asked isn't the question that you're actually answering, because you come from a different culture, right? A woman asking a specific question in a certain way might lead me to think, you know, she's asking for like some career advice, and that could potentially be true, but there could also be like, there could be all these like implications, and these are like societal forces that I don't really understand. So often when we're asking questions, it's like who answers matters, because they're the only ones that are kind of uniquely qualified to kind of understand it, right? So okay, so what is Jama then? How does it differ to like, how is it different to any of these other social networks, right? So often like in social networks, they talk about this thing called the social graph, and it's like, what does it look like? If you drew people as nodes, how are they interacting with each other? Like, where are they seeing each other on social networks? So on Twitter, like the person is like at the very center. So you follow people, right? So we say Justin Bieber has 40 million followers, right? People are interacting with Justin Bieber directly. On Facebook, person is at the very center as well, but they're slightly different, right? So people on Facebook are much more likely to be your friends and family. Twitter, people are much more likely to be people that you don't know from the internet. On Quora, the place where people see each other is like the question or the topic, right? So people don't necessarily like follow other people in the same way. It's not really about the other people, it's about the topics. So you've got like topic experts who are really good at answering questions about specific things. So the social graph for Quora is very different to Twitter and Facebook. And Reddit, it's the subreddit. So, you know, you guys might have seen like relationship subreddit or like any of these other subreddits that have like millions and millions of people. You know, the only way in which you can interact with an individual person is to go through their history on Reddit. Other than that, you'll just have to interact with them through the subreddit. So the subreddit is almost like the core of the social graph, right? So what is Jama then? So Jama, what we're trying to say is actually community is at the center. And so that means like, if you and I belong to the Somali community, if you and I belong to maybe even like an extra national one, like say Black community, then the place where we see each other is like that individual thingy. Now, why is this interesting for us? Well, because the kind of having a social graph that has a person at the middle is precisely the reason why quite a lot of people don't have access to opportunities, right? Like it's the reason why, you know, these Gujaratis and these Ethiopians and Cambodians or whatever succeeding in these businesses, because you need to know someone. What we wanted to build with Jama was like, I don't need to know anyone. I just need to go on this platform and then like tap into this like bigger thing that's bigger than myself. Yeah. So, so this is a picture of Samuel L. Jackson. Some of you may know. Now, on the left-hand side is me thinking about how cool it will be to build this awesome thing that will fix all of our problems. And on the right-hand side is me actually having to implement it. And honestly, like it was pretty stressful to kind of go from like this sort of dreamy land where like, you know, we're going to fix all these problems and like we've got social issues and like this is, you know, technology is going to fix everything, everything's going to be incredible, and actually having to do it was kind of a big wake-up call. And honestly, you know what, I did go from wearing a tux to whatever Samuel L. Jackson is wearing. But before we start talking about the implementation though, I want to kind of bring it to this this Carl Sagan quote that I really like, which I think quite a lot of people who are new to tech don't quite appreciate. And that is that, you know, he says, if you wish to make an apple pie from scratch, you must first invent the universe. And this honestly is like an incredible quote for me, because I think it informs quite a lot of my kind of like software decisions, right? The wheel's already been invented. You don't need to reinvent the wheel, right? And open source, the open source community is like huge, it's vast. The kind of applications and the issues that you think you'll need to fix, other people have probably attempted them. So that means that like before you try and build anything, don't try and build anything from scratch, like just kind of see what's out there. I want to kind of see if there's something that I can sort of like piggyback off, right? That should be like your consideration at all times. Before you start to think, how do I implement this really difficult thing? Go out there and figure out if there's something, if there's something to that effect, right? So I'm going to talk about the kind of the sort of the tech stack, and then I'll kind of if you guys have like any specific questions about the tech stack, obviously shout at me, let me know. I've also put my Twitter handle at the start, and so you guys can ask me like specifically. So I'm just kind of like quickly just kind of like glaze through this, and then we'll kind of like talk about it in detail. So essentially the first thing is Django is the web framework that I decided to use for this project. The writers of Django like call it like batteries included. It's been around for about 10-12 years. It's got about 40,000 stars on GitHub. It's something that is like trusted by a lot of people, and it's also what Instagram and Pinterest and a bunch of like other huge companies use. So it's like a massively scalable thing. So I was just like, look, I don't need to lose sleep over it. This is something that I know. This is something that I know has already proven itself. Let me just kind of play with it. So decided to use Django as a kind of a web framework. In terms of database, I went with Postgres. And again, it was really important for me to use a SQL database, because I think they're like, again, like really safe. I think that they've been around for about 40 years. Like people really understand them really well. There's really good documentation out there, but I also wanted to use something open source. I think it's really important to like use open source things, because in terms of features, I think they just like develop a lot faster. Some people use MySQL and things like that, but I don't think that they are necessarily open source. I think they're owned by Oracle. So I decided to go for Postgres because of like the capabilities that it had, but also because it was like safe. With all of these things though, I think as programmers, I think we can often get really excited about like new tech. And I think it's really good that people get excited, but bro, like that's for your side project. Like, don't, if you've taken people's money as an investment, don't like go for that bleeding edge thing. Like go for things that you understand, things that other people have used, and things that are like sure. So yeah, so that's why I decided to go for Postgres. Use Nginx for as a kind of a proxy. So it basically just like sits in front of your server, and it kind of talks to Django, and it kind of like relays messages back. Again, open source. And then use Docker to sort of help. We've actually got two environments. We've got the kind of the dev environment where we like test and do stuff. And then we've got the production environment, which is like the website. And so having kind of like Docker, and like bear in mind, it's just me, right? So like, there's no kind of like QA, and there's almost like no like data engineer or like someone who can sort of do this stuff for me, right? So I needed to find something where it would be a bit annoying to set up initially, but once I'd set it up, it would like a release would take about 30 seconds, because I just like pull from GitHub, turn the containers off, build, and then restart. And so Docker in that sense was a godsend. So the next thing that I want to kind of talk about is like, kind of staying at the theme of, I wanted the business and commercial requirements like dictate the tech, because I think that's really important, right? Like, you know, it's all very well that you're really excited about this thing, but like, is there a business case for it, right? So you know, there's a few problems I want to talk about, and how we kind of came around them and how we added to this stack. So this stack was almost like the stack from day one, and then it kind of like changed slowly. Yeah. So let's talk about the first one. So problem one is we found that the timeline was too slow. So this is like maybe June or July of last year. We've got very few people on the website who are actually asking questions. And to be honest, like SQL databases, which oh, sorry, I'm going the other wrong way. How do I go? Yeah. Okay. So SQL databases, yeah, I don't know. Yeah, so SQL databases are what Postgres is, right? So it's basically like, you know, think about it as like a massive Excel sheet, right? And like each table is like one Excel sheet, and it has like a very specific type of information in it. So you know, think about like one just being like users, right? So you've got an Excel sheet that has all the user data in it. And then you've got one Excel sheet that has all the questions in it. And then one Excel sheet that has all the answers in it. And one Excel sheet that has like all the like votes, like up votes and down votes on it, right? So if you ask something that was built to give you a dump of one spreadsheet, and you say, mate, I want you to give me 6 spreadsheets and link all of them together per request, well, it starts to get ridiculous, right? So problem one was that we found that like our timeline, which is like when you're logged in and your news feed, we found that that was taking about 3 seconds. And we found that like if like 12 people were on it, then it would like this would go up to like 7 seconds, because like Postgres was just like struggling, and it would ask, and it was almost like making queues for other users, and it was like a horrible experience. So that was a problem that we found like very early on, before there were that many users, and we thought, okay, well let's fix it. So just to kind of like, you know, that might have sounded a bit abstract, like just to kind of like bring it to Twitter, because that's one that a lot of people, you know, understand really well, is, you know, suppose this is my timeline, right? So at the moment I'm looking at 3 tweets. Suppose that you know, if you were to look at the first tweet, you can see that Figma retweeted something, which is a tweet that belongs to someone else. So it's got that person's picture and like username and things like that, right? So you've taken a trip to the user table, right? Because you've got Vic and Kill Nicole from the user table, and then you've gone to the tweet table, right? Because you can see the tweet. So you've gone to 2 spreadsheets to get that single tweet card. But then also you can see that like at the bottom of the first card, you can see the number of likes, right? So that means you've actually taken a trip to the likes table as well. So every single, you know, if you can imagine, like every single tweet goes like and makes 3 trips, right? Unless they do some kind of like prefetch optimization or whatever. But like imagine that every single tweet will do 3 trips, okay? Well, actually, this is not tenable, right? Because on average, like Twitter, your timeline has about 3,000 tweets in it, maybe a little bit less. You know, if you have about 700 followers, if you're following about 700 people, and then the amount of people that they're following is even bigger than that, then you can see that like this exponentially becomes like a huge problem, right? And the problem that we had was not too dissimilar to this. So the way, in fact, there's a really good talk, I think maybe done at RedisCon, maybe like 2013 or 2012, by one of the Twitter engineers talking about it, and they ended up using Redis because this is a problem that they kind of run into, right? Timeline is a really difficult thing for SQL databases to do, Excel spreadsheets to do, yeah? So we took a different approach. My approach was like, actually, this like search is much more important, particularly for this kind of information sharing. I think with Twitter, like, because tweets are jokes and stuff, it's like a lot of it is like ephemeral. Some of the information that we wanted it to be like searchable really easily. Redis is a type of database, and it's yeah, essentially it does like things in memory, and it's like stupid fast. It can do quite a lot of stuff really quickly, but it's not necessarily really good for like long-term stuff. So like most people will use a kind of a SQL database, which is really safe, with like a Redis as like a cache or something like that. Cool. So what we ended up doing was like, we ended up like using this thing called Elasticsearch, which again is like an open source thing. And the way Elasticsearch works is like you basically give it a query, right? So you say, hey, I want you to give me, so for example, you know, if you can see like the bit of the code that I put here, you know, we've got two functions, one that kind of builds community questions, the community query, and then another one that builds a P2P query, and it basically just like puts them together, and then it orders them. So like the kind of the penultimate line, you can see that we're sorting by the latest answer date. So Elasticsearch, the way it works is like again, it lives somewhere on its own, and then as soon as a question changes, you update it, right? So you save your question in your SQL, so you know that your question is safe, that data is safe, like no one can do anything to it, and then you get it to essentially then, when a user hits your timeline, then they're not talking to your database, they're talking to Elasticsearch, right? And so that process is like a lot faster. Yeah, cool. So problem 2, the request response cycle is not enough. So this is an issue that again we ran into when you know, for things like you know, asynchronous tasks, you know, if you've asked me a question and I get an email, right? Well, if Mohammed asked me a question and I'm getting an email and Mohammed's the one who asked the question, then Mohammed shouldn't have to wait, right? He shouldn't have to wait while that email gets sent, right? You know, if there's like often, you know, in web development, we're thinking about the request and the response, right? So you say something to the server and it says something back. Sometimes what you want is like, you want the user to just go away, right? And then you want to kind of like churn at stuff in your own time, and then produce like some results later, so that the user isn't just sat there waiting, because that's not a very nice experience. So a really good example of this is you guys have definitely seen is like, if you ask Facebook or Twitter for your data, because it's a big dump of data, what they'll often say is like, hey, we've recorded your request, go away now, we'll email you later. Yeah, so that's a kind of an asynchronous task that will just kind of happen, but it's not dependent on the request and response cycle. And bear in mind, if you're holding one person up, you're probably holding other people up as well. So it's not a situation that you want to get into where people are waiting for things like that to be done. Yeah. So how did we get around that problem? So we used again, open source library called Celery, which essentially allows you to define any function and put .delay at the end of it. And so you just change the signature of the function a little bit. And what that allows you to do is like, it will just go and do that on its own without impacting the user who's like done the requesting or whatever. The example in the code here, this is a periodic task, which is it's like a decorator that ships with Celery. And essentially we're just saying, hey, like at 11 o'clock every Sunday, I want you to run this function, right? And so it's really good at stuff like that. And so what Redis does is like, it sort of keeps in memory the tasks that have been run by Celery. Yeah, so it's just a way of like keeping up to essentially like keeping in memory the things that have been done and the things that haven't been done. So what do we use this for? Use this for like backing up the database every night, like after midnight, sending out weekly digest emails, sending out reminder emails. So if someone asks you a question, you didn't answer it, we'll send out an email a few days later and we'll say, hey, that question's still waiting for you. And in fact, you've probably had other things like that, right? You've probably had like, invoice waiting for you or something waiting for you email before. It's probably done by a Celery-esque task. And then you have a new question email. So kind of like going back to what we were saying before, if you have a question email, if someone asks you a question, we tell that person, okay, that's done for you. You can go away now. And then in the back, we'll send the email out to you. Yeah. Cool. All right. So problem number 3, it's lonely. So why do I say this? So essentially, this is actually a photo of me taken about 3 months ago. I've had a haircut since, but you probably can't tell. But to be honest with you, if you are the only dev, it can feel lonely a lot, and I think this is like almost sometimes it's a bad thing and sometimes it's a good thing, right? So sometimes it's good because you feel like I can sort of be productive, I can work on my own time or whatever, but also sometimes I think it's difficult to like keep good habits and to like, because no one's reviewing your code, right? So you kind of feel like you maybe like losing touch with how programming should be, etc., like how like the standard of your code. You feel like I could probably get away with like writing some naff code, couldn't I? But to get around this, I used automated tools for like checking code. There's like a bunch of these services that will kind of take your code and then give you like results, like will tell you a percentage of how good your code is. Wrote a bunch of tests. Didn't really appreciate test-driven development until I started working on my own, because it was like, if this thing stops working, then it's on me. And so just having like the stakes higher just meant that like I would just write tests first and then kind of see if anything breaks, then I can't do a new release because something's clearly broken. And then Docker, which I already mentioned, to do like releases and like set up some things out a little bit easier. And then like use like Black and Flake 8. Black, by the way, if you use Python and you do any kind of Python programming, please use Black. It's beautiful. It's a library by one of the core contributors of Python. But just to kind of wrap up though, I don't know if you guys recognize this picture or if you've seen this film. It's from a film called Arrival. It's my favorite film. It's one of my favorite films. Essentially, these aliens come to Earth and people have no idea what they're saying, but they reckon they're probably like communicating with them. But they bring in this linguist and she's trying to like decipher what these aliens are saying. But the real difficulty is, when you're trying to decipher what other human beings are saying, you've got like a common language, you've got frames of references, right? You know that they've got verbs and they've got nouns, and they've got a concept of mom and they've got a concept of dad. But here's like some sort of aliens who you don't know what they have a concept of. You don't even know if they've got a concept of the present or the past. I feel like when you start coding, it can seem a bit like this, right? It can seem like you are interacting with kind of a force that you absolutely have no idea about, and it's just really difficult. But what I would say to you is that like the first 3 to 6 months of your learning development is the most difficult. I think after that you start to have a frame of reference. After that it becomes a lot easier. And so in terms of all the tech that I sort of used and stuff, when I said, oh, this is like Excel or this is like Google, you'll start to kind of like use that specific like style of like communication where I think coding is only really difficult at the very start, but I think beyond that it becomes much easier because you start to like recognize other things to compare it to. So if you're like at the very start of your career and you're thinking about switching and you're doing it for the first time, please, like I'd say, like get a mentor, get someone like to talk to who can sort of explain things to you, but don't quit before like you've gotten to the bit where like things start to make a little bit of sense. Yeah, as always, like if you've got like any questions or you want like mentorship or anything like that, hit me up on my Twitter. I'm happy to also like take questions here. Yeah, thank you.
Bro, Abdul, what can I say? So insightful. We had many questions come in. So we will go through those. Inshallah, Mukhtar, if you could share. I must say you've got a knack for making the complicated quite clear and easy to understand. So thanks for that, Abdul. Someone's also said that in the comments. Okay, we're just going to take 2 questions for now, and then what we'll do is we'll hear from Mohammed as well, and then hopefully we'll have some room to answer a few more questions. Sorry, 2 questions. The first one, what we can do is if you email us or reach out to us on Twitter. So the email is hi@somalisintech.com, and or you can just DM us at somalisintech. We could speak on mentorship and what you can get into a conversation about what you're looking for, and so forth. So it's still very early in the development, and we're still working to figure out how best to make the program to make sure that as well that it's long-lasting relationships for the mentor and mentee. But do reach out to us, and we can take it from there, inshallah. Second, this is the same. This is more for you, Abdul. What are your goals for growing Jama? And also big up yourself for making the esoteric palatable for the layman.
Esoteric.
There we go. So yeah.
Oh, okay. So what am I going? Okay, so I feel like ideally I think we are in quite a unique position in the sense that I feel like our parents, sometimes whether or not our parents like the quality of our lives was literally dependent on whether or not they ran into someone in the 90s, right? And sort of they got a job or an opportunity or whatever. And honestly, I feel like quite a lot is left to luck, particularly with concerns to like cultural capital. I know, and the amount of people that I know who had like their personal statement looked at by kind of an older in the community and have ended up getting into that university and have ended up having like a completely different life. I think what I want, my ultimate aim would be if the kind of offline collaboration that happens in our communities, if it was to happen online, that's the first thing. And the second thing is if we were to, if we could sort of make that more inclusive, because at the moment it does feel like it's just luck, right? Whether do you know someone? If you don't, tough luck. So yeah, that would be my ultimate aim. I think that would be really nice.
Awesome, bro. Awesome. Second question for you. Amazing platform. Why the name Jama?
Ooh, okay. So, you know what? Like,
people are tensing a bit.
I feel like I have to explain to people because people will just think like, "Do you name it after yourself?" And like, no. Like, I actually joined the platform maybe like a year after it got founded by my co-founder, and he and I met a year earlier. And then he was like, "Oh, like I quite like your name. Do you mind if I use it for this thing that I'm doing?" I was like, "Yeah, go ahead, mate." Like, and so he ended up making it 2 M's, and then I didn't think much of it. And then we talked about it, and he was saying that it's got like all these connotations about togetherness and all of that, but also like it's kind of it's very startup-y, as in that like it's 5 letters and pretty easy to spell and unique domain and whatever. And so I didn't push it, but I feel like quite a lot of people think that I named it after myself. Whereas the truth is that I wasn't even in the room when that decision was made. So,
yeah, absolutely. I mean, the Twitter handle is AP Jama, so it does sound like an extension of it. So yeah, Cool. Abdul, thank you very, very much, bro. That was very insightful. We've got a lot of questions, but we won't cover them just yet. We want to hear from Mohammed as well. So hopefully, we'll have some time to answer them afterwards.
Cool. Thanks, man.
So let me just, thank you very much, Abdul. Let me introduce, so we've got Mohammed Sheikh, co-founder of Codivate, software engineer. And we thought it would be great to hear from him to hopefully leave you with a few practical tips, which is quite aligned with the platform that he's built. And what Codivate does is a platform that sends you daily coding tips to your phone. So if you are one of those who are early on in the journey, this is probably a talk for you. And even if you are well into it, again, and from what we heard from Abdul and Hiba, it's always a learning, and it's always a journey, and they're always learning. So yeah, over to you, Mohammed.
Cool. Assalamu alaikum. Can you hear me?
Yes, bro, can hear you very well.
Cool. I'm gonna share my screen.
Brilliant, bro.
Okay. Can you see my screen?
Yeah.
Cool. So yeah, hello everyone. My name is Mohammed Sheikh. I'm a full stack software engineer, and I'm one of two co-founders behind the Codivate platform. It was created with my friend who you see there on the right-hand side called Sana. So before I sort of begin and sort of tell you guys what Codivate is, I'll start by first giving you the background and the rationale as to why it was created in the first place. So I've had Twitter for a while, but I started using it a couple of months ago as a medium to sort of network and connect with like-minded people, especially people in the tech industry. And I think sort of immediately became abundantly clear to me that there was a significant and growing number of people either interested in tech or just starting out. And I'm sure if you must have come across the 100 days of code hashtag and the code newbies hashtag and so on and so forth. So sort of, I was thinking to myself, like, what is the best way that I can pay forward the knowledge and the help that I've been given to sort of reach the position I am in today? And I think the first thing that I could think of was to send scheduled coding tips on my Twitter platform. And those of you who follow me will remember, but I think I was doing 4 5-hour intervals and I was just sending a coding tip. And my friend Senna was doing the same thing as well. And sort of it was well received. The feedback was great. I was getting sort of people messaging me, and I was offering sort of mentorship to some individuals. And then so we thought on the back of that, was having some lunch, and we decided to sort of create a series of products catered to sort of helping people. Helping people who are starting out in tech, and for those sort of in the tech industry, just to sort of encourage and empower them. And Codivate was subsequently the first product. So I think about 3 weeks ago today, or around about that time, we literally decided to sort of create the project. So from inception right through to completion in a maximum of about 2 days. So like in a true hackathon style, right? So what is Codivate? So Codivate is a fairly simple sort of web app, and it's a platform where users can register, choose their programming language and level of choice, and receive daily coding tips. So I'll actually go on to the platform. So can you see this?
Yeah, I can see that, bro.
Cool. So yeah, so this is Codivate here. So it basically just does exactly what it says on the tin. So you can subscribe for free coding tips, you sort of a normal contact form, your name. It's globally supported as well. So wherever you are, so long as you've got a mobile phone, you'll receive your tip. And then you can sort of choose your programming language, so JavaScript and Python. And the reason it's limited to these 2 languages for the time being is because JavaScript is my area of expertise and Python is Senna's sort of area of expertise. And then you can choose your level as well. So whether you're starting out comfortable or if you think you're advanced, then you can go for that option there. And this is sort of, a fairly simple web app, right? Where are we? 1 second. Okay. So the tech stack used to create it was, so this tech stack sort of mirrors what we do on our sort of day-to-day life. So in my role,
if you just want to go to full screen it if you can.
Oh, okay. 1 second.
Make it easier to read. Yeah.
Cool. Yeah, is that better? Okay, cool.
Thank you. Yeah.
So basically the technology is that it was fairly simple for us to choose a tech stack. So we just thought, because we've only got a limited set of time, so we wanted to get it done within a maximum of about 24 hours. So it made sense to use the technologies that we were comfortable with. So we use Node.js on the back end with the Express framework to expose some endpoints. And then obviously, as you'd expect, HTML, CSS, and JavaScript on the front end. And then everything was hosted on an Amazon EC2 instance. So it made sense to use a DynamoDB, which is a database a NoSQL database offered by Amazon. And essentially how it worked is, so the workflow was users would come onto the platform, sign up using the form. It would hit an endpoint in Node.js, and then it would sort of write the user data, so the user's name, number, their language they chose, and their level. It would write that to a local file system. And then Python, who's Senna's area of expertise, sort of wrote a few scripts that would grab that information, populate the database, right, and onboard new users. And then we had a cron tab, which is a Linux scheduling tool that would run once a day. And basically what it do is execute those Python scripts, and it would send the sort of messages out to the individuals who had signed up. And then so some of the other technologies we used were Twilio. So Twilio is probably one of the most well-known platforms out there for sort of programmatically sending and receiving SMS text messages or sending and receiving phone calls. And they've got a fairly sort of easy to use SDK that you can it supports numerous languages, and JavaScript was one of them. So you can just install the library, and literally within a few lines of code, you can get started. And then we used Nginx on the EC2 instance. So an EC2 instance is literally a Linux machine that's hosted on the Amazon platform. So we used Nginx as the web server, and we had sort of PM2 and Node.js just sitting in front of that. PM2 is an application manager, so that sort of supports your Node.js backend. So if it dies, it sort of keeps it alive, and it sort of has its own load balancers and what have you. And then, yeah, we use AWS Route 53, and the purpose of that was just to map the domain name to the IP address. And that was it. So it's a fairly sort of straightforward application. And then these are some screenshots. So you can see on the left, we've got an iPhone device. So that was actually my phone. So this is what it would look like if you were subscribed to a JavaScript tip. And then on the right, we can see sort of somebody who's subscribed to a Python tip. And it's just, yeah, a fairly straightforward application. The reason we chose text messages over emails is that we felt it was more personal. Like me personally, I'd check my email once every couple of hours, if that. So we felt that people check their SMSs a whole lot more, and it just gave us that closeness to our end users, if that makes sense. And what's next? So currently, at this moment in time, Codovate is in a paused state. And the reason for that was it was literally just a hobby project that we've done in about a day. We didn't expect to get even 100 users, but then within a few days, we'd managed to grow to about 700 plus users. So you can imagine the financial implications with sending 700 text messages a day, especially when you're supporting like a global range. So yeah, so at this moment in time, it's paused while we think of a more sort of sustainable way of running the service. And like I said previously, we intend to launch a series of products sort of catered to, like I said, empowering and encouraging people who are in the tech space. So yeah, so watch this space. We will be launching some more products, and that's it from me. Just a short and quick one.
Nice one, Mohammed. Nice one. Whilst it's short, I'm sure many people benefit from it. As soon as it's back up, especially being able to get those text messages and not not having to trawl through your inbox. I think that's quite a good good use case. I'm sure I'm more likely to look at it that way. So that's brilliant, bro. Just before we take some more questions for Mohammed on Newny, I was just looking at the quiz, the feedback form results. I know you lot, it's been very insightful hearing from everyone. So I just wanted to say if we could take a minute or two out just to fill in the forms. We haven't had as many responses or answers that I would have liked. And just to say, today, for instance, we're all here listening to these our three speakers on coding. And the reason why we went with this event choice and this topic choice was because of the feedback we got on the last event. So one of the questions was about what event would you like to hear about next? It was overwhelmingly a coding based event. So we do listen to the feedback that we get in the form. It will literally take about 2 minutes. So just if you could get started on that, that would be really, really helpful. And hopefully there is a question about what event you'd like next as well. There is a coding one if that is the in-demand topic again. But if there are a few other broader topic choices as well. So yeah, do have a look. Please fill out the form. It's the only way really we're gonna make sure that we're building the right community for you. Otherwise, there'll just be our wacky and crazy ideas. So yeah, Mukhtar, if you could bring up Newny again. The platform's been solid, mashallah. It's made, I can speak from the last event, it's made answering questions a lot easier, where last time I had to trawl through Zoom and YouTube and so forth. So yeah, just shout out to you, Mukhtar. That's Newny.io. If you're hosting your own event, do check it out. Mukhtar is very friendly. We just got in touch from the last event and we've already had our domain name set up. So yeah, that's a shout out to Nuni. But yeah, so here we go. Codivate. Mohammed, where did you source the actual tips from? Self-written?
So about 80% of the tips were self-written, and about 20% were sort of sourced from elsewhere. But the good thing about a platform like this is because sort of as a software engineer, technology is always in a state of flux. So by actually writing these tips, it helps to consolidate my own knowledge.
Yeah, okay. And how did you research for this product before actually developing? Like you mentioned the fact that you wanted to go for emails, text message over emails. And also what resources did you consult? Super confused by this part of the process. If you could shed some light on that for us.
Yeah, so I'm gonna premise this with, so coding for me is a hobby. So sometimes I'll create a project and it doesn't necessarily have to be a success. So either it's successful or I learn from I sort of strengthen the tools that I already know, right? So in terms of how did I research the product, I was actually sending out coding tips on my Twitter page and doing it in a scheduled way. So every 5 hours or so, I'd send a tip based on my expertise and sort of what I'd gathered in the software engineering field, right? And just from that alone, it was well received. I got sort of good feedback from people. People were DMing me, and I was offering mentorship to some individuals. So in terms of research, I think that kind of validated the idea for me. In terms of what resources did you consult, I'm not sure what's meant by that. Are they sort of referring to how did I research that?
Yeah, I think, exactly. Like, for example, you mentioned you had used Twilio. How did you come up with that maybe?
Oh, okay.
How did you settle on that choice?
Yeah, so basically, like I said before, so I like doing projects as a hobby, and all the technologies that you saw in the tech stack were things that I'd used before. So I think a couple of months ago, I wrote a Node.js application that, so if you've got a to-do list, if you've got like items in your to-do list that are like 2 or 3 days overdue, it would send you a text message to your phone. If it's like overdue by more than 6 days, then it would give you a call. And I used Twilio for that. And a lot of, so in implementing this, I was able to reuse a large chunk of that. So all the technologies that I'd used were sort of things that I'd used before in previous projects, or if not my own projects, then things that I'd done at work.
Okay, so I'm taking from what you're saying that one of your tips is for people to work on projects. So for those budding developers who are listening in, your tip is just work on small projects and see those through.
Yeah, so I'd say, firstly, for anybody who's sort of looking into getting into software engineering, the first advice I would give and what worked for me is to learn just enough to be able to land your first role, right? Okay. And you can gauge what that is by doing as many interviews as you can. So every time you go to an interview, you either get the job. If you don't, then you learn from the experience and you get an idea of what they're looking for and the kind of things that they're asking for. And then as a result, you can brush up your skills, if that makes sense. And then once you've got your foot into the door, then it's smooth sailing from there because you'll be learning sort of every day on the job.
Okay, bro. We'll take one more question for Mohammed, and then we'll open up to because we've still got loads of questions for Hiba and Abdul as well. So Mohammed, have you thought about sending tips via WhatsApp instead?
Yeah, so that was initially we wanted to do it via WhatsApp, but getting access to the WhatsApp API is notoriously difficult. Yeah, it's really difficult. So so we had to settle with text messages instead. It would have been cheaper as well to do on WhatsApp.
Yeah, I was just going to go and say, is that something that maybe, I know earlier somebody raised a point about Hiba's game 2.0. So is that something that we could look to see maybe on the roadmap for the future?
Yeah, definitely.
Message?
Yeah, possibly. So it'll just be a matter of actually trying to get the API access. If we can't, then we're still sort of in the process of thinking about a better way a more sustainable way of delivering the service. If we can't think of anything, then we may probably just keep it paused and come up with a similar product or something else.
Okay, awesome, bro. Okay, we'll take a question for Hiba. Wow, I can't believe it. It's only it's literally 3 minutes left. The time's flown by. Hiba, can you tell us about your experience at Makers Bootcamp? It's one of the best in Europe, I hear. And please tell us about just tell us about your experience doing a boot camp as well.
Yeah, it was a very intense experience. I really enjoyed it. It was just something that you can't really mentally prepare for. You just have to kind of go for it. It was really useful for structuring my learning. Coming from a completely different background, I really felt a bit lost how to start learning to code. So it was very useful for me. Yeah, I'm happy to take any more specific questions on Twitter, because I don't really know exactly what to say right now, but I would recommend it personally.
And for you, one of the main benefits was the structured element of it. Is that right?
Yeah.
And what about like the fact that you're also with a group of other people, whether, you know, I'm sure probably be remotely now, but how did that impact your learning rather than, you know, you being at home? Because Abdul mentioned that it could be a lonely journey being the only being the sole developer. How does that contrast with your experience?
I guess on one side it wasn't so lonely because we were on a Slack group together and meeting up every day. There's a lot of pair programming, actually pair programmed every day of that. Basically 14 weeks. So I didn't feel too alone, but of course it's not the same as if we were in person, which we would have been had we not been in this pandemic. So
so yours was remote as well then?
Yeah, totally remote.
Okay. What I was going to say, Mukhtar, we take one more question for Abdul as well, and then wallahi, I can't believe it, but it's almost 8 o'clock, so we'll leave it there. But let's take one more question for Abdul first. Abdul, are you worried that you aren't making the best tech choice, the best choices tech-wise because you don't have other devs to bounce your ideas off of?
Yeah, I think so. I think you have to constantly be questioning your choices, right? But the thing that I found really helpful though, because so at my last job I had my manager who did most of the code reviews was like someone who's just like incredible and like knew everything and would just give you really good feedback. And this is, you know, it's one of the things that I sort of miss. But what I've taken to over the past maybe like 8 months is like watching things like PyCon conferences and watching people's presentations and kind of like trying to pick up little subtle things, because I think the thing about coding is that, like, you know, you can learn the syntax, but there's almost like an art to it. There's like a very subtle thing that is like very difficult to like put your finger on unless you've come across that problem. And so the thing that I found really helpful was like watching lots of those conferences and then trying to apply some of those learnings, right? So there's like a particular design pattern, or there's like a thing that you shouldn't do, and I'm like, crap, I'm using that thing a lot, right? Like, you know, I watched a thing last night about if statements and using like polymorphism in like classes and stuff to like move away from it, and I was just like, oh my god, like I can think of one function that has like loads of if statements, maybe I should get rid of that. So I think you definitely question yourself a lot, but if you are proactive and kind of like read a lot and watch like other people who are really good at their jobs talk about programming, then I think you'll be fine.
Okay. So just always stay in tune with the latest and kind of continue in that journey. Okay, brilliant. I feel like that annoying person who keeps plugging the same thing again, but I just wanted to say, everyone, please fill out the forms. It'll be really, really insightful for us. But the other things I just wanted to touch on is, firstly, thank you very much to all the speakers. Can you still hear me, Abdul?
Yeah, I can hear you. Yeah.
Okay, yeah, brilliant. So I just want to say thank you very much to all the speakers, and thank you very much to to Mukhtar as well at Newny. There are a few takeaway messages that I want to say. Fill out the form, please. And one of the main questions we're hoping to get answered is homes for the community, whether that be on whether that should be on Slack, Facebook groups, or any other suggestions from yourself. That's open to everyone. We are currently building our website. We're doing that as a collaborative approach with Hiba and many others in the community as well. So we hope to launch that at the end of next month. So stay tuned for that. As I said earlier, this event choice was based on the feedback. So hopefully next month, let us know what event you'd like. You could either do that via Twitter, hashtag Somalis in Tech. Let us know there, or the feedback form again. Please do follow Hiba Codes. That's at Hiba Codes. You've got hopefully hear a lot more about. She's actually tweeting quite regularly. There's a lot of insights. You can feel free to hit her up with any questions that you have. There was a lot that Abdul said. There were many questions that we couldn't get to answer as well. He's AP Jama. You can find him on Twitter. Code with Mo. Hopefully those tips will be coming through. So that's at Code with Mo. And of course, Somalis in Tech. We are hoping to have a hackathon soon. So stay tuned. And what I'm thinking about off the cuff here is we've got quite a few questions that will remain on the platform. So that's Newny.io. So they will be there. And we may try to have a sort of offline session with the speakers to get them to answer a few. And we could hopefully send that out in an email format to yourselves. I think we've got everyone's email who signed up through Eventbrite. So we'll try to get some of the more answers to you. We're actually even running over now. So yeah, thank you very much, everyone. And we appreciate you joining. And what was that? Yeah, so we've got the thread going at Somalis in Tech, hashtag Somalis in Tech. And we'll also try to get the speakers to answer the questions via Twitter. So I'm kind of throwing you in there, guys. So yeah, stay tuned. And yeah, that's it from me. Hopefully we shall see you for an event next month. And in the meantime, have a good time. Jazakallah for joining.